Long before the young shepherd David became the legendary king of Israel, there was Eliab, his eldest brother, tall, strong, and every bit a warrior in appearance. Born the firstborn in the house of Jesse, Eliab grew up with the weight of family expectations resting on his broad shoulders. He was a figure who commanded respect, his height towering above his brothers, his voice deep and authoritative. But as fate would have it, in the grand story God was weaving, Eliab's stature was not enough. For when the prophet Samuel arrived at the house of Jesse to anoint the next king of Israel, Eliab was passed over. Samuel to himself, "Surely, this is the one." Samuel gazes upon Eliab, taking in his powerful frame, his confident expression. Everything about Eliab says, "King." He's the obvious choice. Samuel begins to lift his horn of oil. Samuel's hand was steady as he reached to anoint Eliab, but just as his hand neared the eldest son's head, a voice, quiet, powerful, unmistakable, stopped him. "Do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, for I have rejected him." The message was clear. God had seen what Samuel couldn't. Samuel paused, his gaze lingering on Eliab, who looked ready, expectant. But no oil touched his head. Eliab, to himself, with a flicker of doubt, why did Samuel stop? "Surely, I am fit to be king. I have strength. I have the looks." But doubt creeps in, his jaw tightens, and his smile fades as Samuel moves to his younger brothers. When Samuel anointed David, the youngest and least likely of the brothers, shock rippled through the family. The brothers tried to mask their disbelief, but Eliab's reaction was different. Something boiled in him. Disbelief turned into a flicker of resentment. Eliab, to himself David, the young shepherd who spent his days with sheep, this runt who sings to the clouds, a king? He forces a smile, but his eyes burn with jealousy. Time passed, and that resentment only grew. One day, as the Philistine giant Goliath challenged Israel's army, David arrived at the battlefield, sent by their father with food for his brothers. He approached Eliab, eager to see the battle, his youthful excitement barely contained. "Eliab, with narrowed eyes, why did you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness?" His words are sharp, slicing through David's excitement. His voice carries an edge that goes beyond annoyance. It's laced with contempt. "David, defensively, what have I done now?" The young boy's face falls, confusion and hurt flaring up as he meets his eldest brother's gaze. But Eliab didn't relent. The sight of David, the chosen one, standing with interest, perhaps even bravery, seemed to unnerve Eliab. Perhaps it was a reminder of his own rejected status. Eliab couldn't bear the thought that his youngest brother might be something more, something chosen by God. "Eliab," in a scoffing tone, "I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle." But David wasn't there for vanity. God had set him on a path that no one in his family could see. It was Eliab's own heart that lay exposed. God knew the pride that dwelled within Eliab, the envy that clouded his vision. God saw his tendency to judge, to belittle, and to hide behind his warrior's exterior. And in that pride, in that disdain for his younger brother, God found something unworthy of kingship. Eliab may have looked like a king, but his heart was far from it. And that heart, burdened by pride and bitterness, was the very reason God had turned to David, who bore a shepherd's humility. As David, undeterred by Eliab's scorn, stepped forward to face Goliath, Eliab's heart clenched. Watching his youngest brother stride into the valley, unarmed but for a sling and a few stones, Eliab's pride was pricked yet again. Eliab, to himself, anxious and conflicted foolish boy. He thinks he can face a giant with no armor. no sword? But there was a flicker of something else, too. A whisper of fear that maybe, just maybe, God was indeed with David. The echoes of the battle faded, and David returned victorious. Israel's hero, chosen by God to lead them in spirit and faith. And there, amid the rejoicing, stood Eliab, his heart wrestling with what could have been. Eliab, in a broken whisper to himself, what did I lack? What did David have that I didn't? His voice catches in his throat as the answer unfolds in his mind. Eliab finally understood that it wasn't about stature or skill. It was about the heart. Pride had been his downfall. God had chosen David for his humility, for his willingness to serve, for a heart that beat in tune with God's own. And so, while David rose to become the king God had ordained, Eliab remained a lesson. A reminder that God's favor rests not on appearance, but on a heart that surrenders in humility. The strength of the soul, not the stature of the body, is what God desires in a leader. In the story of Eliab, the eldest brother of David, we find a lesson that reaches beyond time and place. Eliab was the firstborn, a warrior, the one who looked like a king. Yet, God did not choose him. Why? And what can we learn from this tale? The first lesson: God does not judge by appearances, achievements, or reputation. He values the heart, its humility, its willingness to trust, its devotion. Eliab may have looked like a leader, but pride had tainted his heart. And God could see it, even when others could not. Eliab, consumed by pride, looked down on his younger brother. Pride can blind us, leading us to see others as less than ourselves, to judge without understanding. Eliab dismissed David as just a boy, too small, too inexperienced. But in the end, it was David who had the courage to face Goliath, while Eliab stood on the sidelines. The second lesson: resentment and envy can destroy relationships, families, even our own peace. God's purpose for each of us is unique, and comparing ourselves to others only leads to bitterness. Eliab's envy blinded him to the value of his own gifts and the beauty of God's plan. Unlike Eliab, David had a humble spirit. While Eliab focused on appearances and position, David focused on serving with all his heart. God saw this humility and willingness. David's heart was surrendered, ready to serve in whatever way God called him. In David, God found a heart that was loyal, not proud, willing, not self-seeking. The lesson here is that God values a heart of humility and service. We may not always be in the spotlight, but our small acts of faithfulness do not go unnoticed by God. Finally, Eliab's story reminds us that God's plans are far greater than our own. Eliab had expected that he would lead, that he would fight Goliath, and that he would be chosen. When things didn't go as he'd hoped, his heart turned bitter. But David, on the other hand, trusted in God's timing and plan, even when it led him from the pasture to the battlefield. In the end, Eliab's story is a reminder. God does not choose the proud, the strong, or those who rely on appearances. He chooses those who trust him wholeheartedly, who surrender in humility, who seek to serve rather than to rule. We all have an Eliab within us, a part that wants recognition, that feels entitled, that envies. But like David, we're called to a different way. God is calling us to let go of pride, to avoid the trap of envy, and to trust him with a willing heart. So let us remember Eliab's story as a reminder to seek humility, to celebrate others' victories, and to serve faithfully in whatever place God calls us. For in the end, God sees the heart, and it is there that our true worth lies. Thank you for watching and exploring Eliab's story with us. If this story touched you or taught you something new, please like, subscribe, and share it with others. When you share our videos, you are shining more light into the decaying world. Join us next time as we dive into more incredible, real-life lessons from the Bible. See you in the next video. God bless you.